Welcome to Unstitching ADHD Urban Ed Talks. This episode centers on moving beyond deficit-based narratives to define real successes for students with ADHD. We will explore practical classroom strategies, mindset shifts for educators and leaders, and the power of self-advocacy, grounded in both professional expertise and lived experience. Today, I am honored to be joined by Dr. William Lane, an educational consultant, academic coach, advocate, and international speaker dedicated to improving outcomes for individuals with learning differences. With experience also as a special educator, school leader, professor of special education, Dr. Lane brings both professional expertise and lived experience to helping students, families, and educators move beyond labels towards meaningful, sustained success. Dr. Lane, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
So let's start with your journey. So what really got you into working with students who learn differently, and how has that passion evolved?
I myself have a learning disability. I have self-diagnosed myself as being on the spectrum. So I have real life experiences and I know what the students are going through and what the parents are going through. And third, I guess, is what the educators are going through with those students. I put my parents through it. I put my educators through it. And I've lived it. It gives me a deeper empathy for the parents. And I think that's what's put me into this because I'm looking at it from both sides. And I have that experience to say, look, when this is happening, this is what helps me. Not read it out of a textbook. I can tell you what has helped me, and we can try this with your student or your child.
And you talk about being self-diagnosed, right? As being on the spectrum. How has that shaped, even though you have touched a little bit on that? Can you expand more on how that has shaped your understanding of ADHD and neurodiversity?
I think because I'm self-diagnosed and I know what the traits are and I know my weaknesses, say like, Dr. Lane, can you explain what you can do to be better disorganized? Because I am very disorganized. So I'm like, okay, these are some things that I have used that have helped me because I have the learning experience and the experience of having a learning difference. So I think that is a big point. And I've had social challenges. I mean, I literally was, in fact, the other day, just as a story, I was going through some old materials in my house and I found my yearbook. We won't talk about the date, but I did find my old yearbook and literally it had no signatures in it. So, I mean, I was bullied all through high school, all through middle school. And so those experiences have stuck with me. But when I looked at that yearbook and started going through it and looking at the pictures, and it got to the end of the book and there was nobody that had signed my yearbook, and that was tough. And I think that's what a lot of students are doing. And, I didn't include it in my bio, but I wrote a #1 best-selling book. It's called Stop Being Invisible, Overcoming Communication Barriers. And it's to help people who don't know how to deal with social situations. They don't know how to start a conversation. And so that has helped me. And I encourage people to read that just because it's not just students with learning differences. It's everybody kind of has communication skills. I mean, we kind of start like with, well, how was your day? Fine. And that's about the end of the conversation. So there's more to conversations than that. And I think people need to know that. And I think it would help society in general just understand other people's because we're so busy with electronics and fast motion things that keep our interest that we don't have time to communicate with others.
Interesting. Communication, you're so right. I don't think there's anybody or there's any one way of getting it right.
Right.
But because we almost times think linear, it becomes a challenge for us to communicate or start conversations because we think there's a particular way it has to be done. If it's not done that way, then guess what?
You were wrong, and yet
Or you have a problem.
it only takes that one failure to like, I'm not doing this again. You know, I mean, so
Yes.
it's important that when you do step out, that you step out kind of feeling good about yourself and like, okay, if this doesn't work, maybe I can try something else. Not like get it to your heart and like, I'm done having conversations with people. So
Thank you. So, urban settings, which is normally the epicenter of education. I always say that because you have all groups, all different types of people. That's where diversity is. My question is, from your own experience, to students with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, popularly known as ADHD, what kind of challenges do they face in urban settings? And what do schools often misunderstand or overlook?
pretty much a little bit of what I said before was that they're disorganized. They have trouble starting a task. They suffer from burnout, and sometimes people see that as laziness. And it's like, well, if you would just try harder, I'm sure you've heard that a lot of times in different podcasts. And you've heard teachers say, I've heard teachers say it to me when I was in school, you need to just try harder and you'd be okay. Well, I'm trying as hard as I can. I'm giving it my all. We need to work together to help me because I'm not learning the way you're teaching. And I think that's what's overlooked is there has to be an adaptation to reach out to teaching the student the way that they learn best. And some of those things are like, organizational notes, breaking things down into small tasks. And the analogy I use for that is, okay, how do you eat an elephant? The answer is one spoonful at a time. So if you go up to an elephant and there's this great big elephant, you're like, there's no way I can eat all this. But you can if you just take one spoonful at a time, just small steps to make progress. So any step that you take and can see an accomplishment, that is very productive to the learning of, students with diverse learning styles, I think.
Thank you so much. When you talk about, where you started by talking about being lazy and not putting enough effort, I remember a student once saying to a teacher that, you know what, it's not like I'm lazy or not putting effort. The truth is, it's like a million trampolines right in my brain right now. So I'm trying so hard, but I just can't get this, and you probably can't see it, right? So you're so right. It's not lazy. It's not. And I believe the more we become aware and we understand what's going on, the better urban educators and educators in general, will create environments that will be inclusive enough for all students, right?
Yes.
Okay, let's talk about compliance. I know when I do some trainings, I ask people if compliance in the educational setting, the K-12 setting, if compliance equals to engagement. And I get them to debate. And the debate is always very, very exciting because now people want to rephrase that word. And I'm like, no, because right away, most people use the word compliance. And so now we have attached that to rigid structures. If you are not acting this way, crisscross apple sauce,
Right.
then you are not studying. So when we design environments like that, then it becomes challenging. So let's go back to your beyond grades or
Okay.
compliance.
Okay.
What should success look like for students with ADHD?
I think success should for students with ADHD and pretty much for all students with learning differences or any neurodiversity is that they're able to have a successful and meaningful life, that they learn how to adapt to things as they happen. And that's what school is about. And sometimes if you show them the importance of something, it makes it more meaningful. Like, why do I have to learn algebra? Why do I have to learn physics? Okay, well, here's a real life situation where you can use it. You're at Thanksgiving dinner and somebody says, okay, I need you to cut the pie so that 8 people get the same share. Well, okay, cut it in half, cut it in quarters, and then I cut those in pieces again, and I wound up with 8 pieces. But to just say, well, you have to know your fractions, you have to know these kind of things, it's not helpful because the students don't see the purposefulness of what they're learning or the meaningfulness of why it's important that they know.
We say focus is not linear. And the ADHD brain is designed for distraction.
Right.
But the beautiful thing about it, interest, urgency, and meaning can trigger the best in that brain, right? So I'm so happy you mentioned, making meaning, and your story is talking about if it means, and does that not motivate all of us? I mean, interest, meaning, those are the things that motivates virtually everybody, neurotypical or, everybody. So thank you for bringing that up. So let's now come to practicality, implementable strategies. Can you describe or give us, say, 2 to 3 real support systems that can assist students with ADHD function in a real classroom?
I'm pretty sure this. One of my strategies would be to break it into small steps so that it doesn't look like such a large task. You have a term paper due in 3 weeks. Well, most of us, no matter what it is, if we have 3 weeks to do it, we're going to wait till week 2, day number 6, or maybe even day number 7 before we even start it. But if the student is given like, okay, by this date, this much has to be finished, and I'd like to see it. Next, so we set deadlines for things. If we're faced with a deadline, anybody, if we're faced with a deadline, we get it done. Okay, you have to have your room cleaned up by tomorrow. It's probably going to get done. At work, the boss says, I need your paper turned in by tomorrow or you're not going to get paid. Oh, that's a motivator. So you're going to jump on that a little more important than another task, maybe. So I think by breaking it in small pieces, like eating the elephant, it's like, okay, I can do this. Oh, yeah, I can do this. And the student, the individual, the adult, whomever, is seeing what I call the 3 minis. Okay. It would be mini steps, mini deadlines, and mini successes. So here's a little bit. Oh, I do that. Okay, I feel good about it. I've met the deadline and I've had success. I'm proud of myself. I can do this task. It's not overwhelming. It's not like you referred to. There's not a lot of, trampolines jumping around in my mind. I'm not like scatterbrained. I'm having success. I'm feeling good about myself. I'm going to continue and move on and complete this task.
Thank you. Let's talk about mindset, educators and school leaders. What kind of mindset shift do educators and school leaders need to make better support neurodivergent learners? What kind of mindset shift do you think they need to make?
I think I would like to see them shift in the understanding that they're not alone.
Mhm,
There is support out there for them.
mhm,
And there's nothing wrong with asking for help. I think a lot of people see asking for help as a weakness.
mhm,
I don't want to go to somebody for help. I'll figure it out myself. And then when you can't, you're lost. The students are losing time. They're losing educational learning. And it's just like the shift has to be, it's okay if I go to an advocate or if I ask somebody else for help. Please show me what you would do. Like in my experience, when you had this problem, Dr. Lane, what did you do to make it better? What can the teachers do to make it better to help my child? Or the teachers will say, Dr. Lane, what can I do to help a child who's doing this? I think that's the biggest mind shift. You're not in this alone. You have other people to help you. You just have to reach out because we're here. And I say that for both you and I think are perfect examples of that.
Mm-hmm. So I just from this, your response, there's so much research out there about neurodiverse learners. There's so much out there. Why do you think, from your experience, why is that gap between those research findings translating into school environments, to make a difference? Why is there a gap between research and schools? There's so much research, yet schools are still, there's still so much unawareness. There's so much ignorance in the educational setting about those research to improve schools. I'll give you a very good example. Schools still look at structure. You sit down still, you raise your hands when you are asked to, you speak when you are asked to, and if the class will last for 45 minutes, that's how long you need to sit still, right?
Yep.
Research has shown that even for neurotypical people, individuals, sitting for too long is a problem, right? They lose focus at one point, right? How come schools are not able to make this shift towards these research findings? Why that gap?
I feel that sometimes we're still back in the 19th century where the teacher has to be the leader of the classroom. There is no small group. There is, like you said, sit in your seat, raise your hand, very strict. And I don't want to, kind of military, but it's like we have to follow these rules. And it's not the way it should be. Students learn best when they're interacting with other students. Small group instruction. Teacher moves around to the groups. But some teachers don't want to lose that control of the classroom. They feel that when the students are in small groups and talking, maybe they're not working, maybe they're not accomplishing as much as they should. But even just the social interaction of them being in the groups is important because then they're talking to each other. They're discussing the material. And again, set a deadline. If you work in small groups, by 15 minutes, I'm going to ring a bell and I want this work turned in. Okay, there's a deadline, there's a must meet. Students would be more motivated. But I think it's that the teachers don't want to lose the control. I don't want to lose the classroom. And I think administrators are pretty much the same way. I walk in and I want to see your students in a row. I want to see you doing all the work, them just being like sponges. You put the material out there and they're supposed to suck it in. Well, one, their brains can only hold too much if it's not meaningful. And with modern technology, if we can hold somebody's attention for 5 seconds, we've done a good job. So that's what teachers are fighting now. You scroll through your phone looking at something, first thing in the morning, you get up, boom. It's no longer saying prayers or gratitude. It's like, well, I've got to look at my phone and see what happened. There's definitely been a mind shift, attitude shift. Know of parents who've complained of their child taking the computer into the bathroom and going to the bathroom and being on their phone. I mean, we're all guilty of that. But again, there's so many other things you could use constructively for your time that we're not doing because it's so easy to just go on the device and look at things that interest us. And the present lawsuit right now with some of the social media companies, they're being sued because they have that device in there that just keeps attracting students' attention. And that's what teachers are facing, and they can't do it unless there's active involvement by the students.
Okay. Thank you. Let's talk about self-advocacy,
Okay.
which we know is key to really helping neurodiverse learners really, fit into that, even though we use the word everyday inclusive, but inclusive still means linear, neurotypicals, right? How can schools, administrators and educators in schools, and families especially better support advocacy for students with ADHD?
A lot of that. I think parent participation is so important. The parents have to be involved in the child's education. They were their child's first teacher. They taught them how to feed themselves, how to talk, how to walk, all these things, how to ride a bicycle. I like to think of it as, when there's a meeting about your child, if you're not there to share all that background information about your child, you know, this is what they do, this is what they like. I'm going to give your child chocolate because they did something good in class. Well, if chocolate is not a motivator for that child, it doesn't work. And the teacher's wondering, why isn't it working? But if the parent were there, involved in a discussion about the child, they could say, look, my daughter doesn't like chocolate, and therefore that's not a good reinforcer for her. So, parent involvement is so important. When you go to the IEP meeting, there's the parent and everybody else is sitting around the table. And I always say, everybody around the table has like vegetable soup after their name. And the parent's like, I don't belong here. You guys are the experts. You know everything. And that's not true. You know more about your child than anybody at that table does. You know more about them than the teacher does, because most teachers, like the first day before school, they get a list of students, they make name tags, put them on the desk, and they don't know who Sally Jones is. They don't know who Oscar is. But if the parent were to reach out and say, look, these are some things that work with my child, here's how you can help them. And I think parent advocacy is very important. I think in-service days for teachers need to be more meaningful. I don't think that in many cases, the time that you have to work with the teachers is used effectively by the administrative staff.
Thank you. That's insightful. Um, if you could unstitch one dominant myth about ADHD in education, would it be? And what truth should replace it?
I think the one myth that I would see that would really be a big improvement is for teachers, parents, anybody, that we are not lazy. We are not lazy. We just learn differently than other people. We are people. We are worthwhile. We just need to be treated in that manner. You need to find or ask me what works for me, what I would like to have you do differently. And I think if we could unstitch that about ADHD and maybe some of the other disabilities, we're not lazy. We are capable. We can do the work. You just have to motivate us and give us a reason for wanting to do that work.
I love that.
Yeah.
Now we have talked about all the challenges. You have given us some very simple strategies, very simple, straightforward strategies. Now, I want to ask, because hope drives what we do. Human existence is based on hope. The hope of a better tomorrow, the
Right.
hope of the hope. That's what keeps us going.
Sure.
So, what gives you hope about the future of neurodiversity affirming practices in schools. Is there anything there that gives you hope?
I think as I work with parents and educators, I see the hope that they're starting to ask, what can I do better for the child? What ideas do experts have? You know, educators are very busy all the time. Some of them have second jobs to support themselves. They go home to their own children. They've got families. They're fixing meals. They've got activities. The students are in after school activities. So, you've got all that going on. And then you're saying to teachers, okay, we need you to learn this also. But I'm encouraged because I see educators and parents reaching out to experts like yourself and saying, okay, what can you supply to us? What can you give us? What ideas can you give us? I think the idea of this podcast is an excellent idea because it shows the parents and educators who watch it what they can do to help themselves be better and to improve the life of students with neurodiversity.
You have given us so much. Now, I know in my comments, I'll hear people say, how do I get to Dr. Lin? How do I reach him? I want you to share your work, in your own words. What are you doing? And how can people reach you? How can educators, parents reach you if, there is need for your...
I have a web page. It's drdrwilliamlane.com. And you can go in there and you can read the newsletters that I put out. You can read about my book. You can read about my story. And if we have time, I'll share this with you. When I was in school, I had an educator tell me I would amount to nothing, that I would never be successful in life. And this was an educator, and this was the approach they took to me. So that's why we go back and I look at it and say, we're not lazy. You just haven't hit my button yet. And I mean that in a good way, not in hitting the button and making them go off, but that you've got to motivate me. You've got to excite me to want to learn what you're teaching me. And, I keep thinking back that thought, even at my age, that's high school educator that said that to me is still in the back of my mind, and if I could sing a song to them, it would be, look at me now. They say, I would never amount to anything, and just look at me now. You know.
Dr. Lin, you know what? I always say when I do my professional trainings, I always say to teachers, educators generally, students never forget two people in their lives.
Yep.
The best teacher that made them feel seen and safe, and teachers that told them they will never amount to anything, not just only by their words, but by their actions.
Yes. Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that. And I know parents that are listening right now or viewing this show right now that have been told that they will amount to nothing will look at your story and say, if Dr. Lin can do it, I can do it.
True.
So thank you very much for sharing that. As we head back into our classrooms, schools, and communities, take one idea from today and put it into practice. One shift in mindset,
Yes.
one change in support, one moment of advocacy for a neurodivergent student. That's how real change begins. Like I always say, the sun is behind the cloud. It will always shine for those who are patient and persistent. So thank you for listening to Unstitching ADHD Urban Ed Talks. I'm your host, Dr. Stanley Ekiyor, and Dr. Lane, thank you again, And if you have one last word, I'll give you an opportunity to say it.
I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to share some of my knowledge and a lot of my experiences. So thank you very much.
We are
And
to have you.
please, I ask the educators and the teachers and the parents who are listening to please do what you're advocating. Just one thing from this podcast, and it'll make a big difference.
Yes. Thank you so much. And till next time, stay warm. For those of you right now in the zone of, I think they call it the Arctic blast.
Arctic blast or Arctic bomb, I forget which it is,
Yeah, I
but
don't
I'll
know.
tell you, I'm so glad I'm like about 100 miles above it.
Yeah.